Well, welcome to the third chapter of Jonah. We'll continue where we left off on the second chapter, and it begins in verse 1. It says, Ke ageneto logos kyriou prosionon ek vevteru legon. And it came to pass, the word, the logos, kyriou prosionon, the second time, vevteru, the Deuteronomy, the book, the second law, saying, Legon, Anastati, Porevthiti is Ninevei, Tin Polin, Tin Megalin, Ke Kirikson in Avti Kata, To Kirigma, To Emprostan o Ego, Elalisa Pros Se. Rise up, go unto Nineveh. You see here they have the diaresis with the two dots above the epsilon, and then so it's Nineveh with the epsilon diphthong, Nineveh, and the pronunciation is accented on the iota. So rise up and go unto Nineveh. So it's now the word of the Lord to Jonah the second time. First time he said to do it, and now and Jonah did the opposite. Now Jonah is laying on the beach after spending 3 days in the belly of the sea monster, and God is telling him to do the same thing. And kirigson, to proclaim in it. Kirigma is English derivative. The authoritative apostolic pronouncements were called kirigma. And this is where it comes to proclaim. It wasn't to go into the city and start a church, but to get out into it and proclaim as a herald would. And according to the proclamation, the kirigma, which I, ego, being ego, I spoke, elalisa, the laleo, that has to do with speech, lalia, which I spoke to you before, and of the destruction of the city. And verse 3, it continues, Ke anesti ionas ke aporevthi is Ninevei, katha Elalise Kyrios. So here Jonah rose up and went into Nineveh as the Lord spoke, Elalisa. Ide Ninevei in polis megali to theo, osi porias odhu, trion imeron. And Nineveh was a great city. It's had something like 15 gates in it. It was huge. It was a city that is mentioned in Genesis for the first time, chapter 10, verses 9. It starts and it says, this one was a giant hunter with hounds before the Lord God. On account of this they shall say, as Nimrod, a giant hunter with hounds before the Lord. And came to pass the beginning of his kingdom, Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From out of that land came forth Assyria, and he built Nineveh, also in the midst of Calah. So this Nineveh was a city that was goes all the way back into the beginnings of time, attached to Nimrod. And it's on the eastern bank of the Tigris River up in northern Iraq today, near the city of Mosul. It's mentioned it became really very powerful around 700 BC with Sennacherib, the king who attacked Judah with Hezekiah being the king, and he took over most of the country, but not Jerusalem, as it mentions in the history there in the Chronicles. But Nineveh was talked about or against. If you go into the book of Nahum, you'll see that the whole thing is about against Nineveh, the concern of Nineveh. It says in the first verse of Nahum, the scroll of the vision of Nahum, the Elkoshite. So it's all about Nineveh. We'll be going into Nahum, and we'll go into this a little bit more. And then it mentions it again in Zephaniah 2:13, where it says, "And he will stretch out his hand against the north, and he shall destroy the Assyrian, and he shall establish Nineveh for a waterless extinction, as a wilderness." And that's what happened. Nineveh went into extinction. It was covered over by the sands, and by the time of Xenophon, later when the Greeks went through that area, there was no sign of the city at all. It was just all flat until the 1840s, when Sir Henry Layard explored this area and discovered the lost palace of Sennacherib with its 71 rooms and 2,000 cuneiform clay tablets. And so then all of a sudden it all opened up as far as this history of Nineveh. So Nineveh was a great city, 15 huge gates. Many of them were rebuilt. And it says right here, Nineveh was a megali. We have the great megaton bama, megalipolis, the metropolis, the main city, to theology being the derivative, as the goings of a journey, odhu, a cathode, a current, a way of a current, of trion, tri, emeron, days, ephemeral, has to do with daily things. Then verse 4 continues, Ke irxato ionas, tu eporevis theis tin polin, osi porian, emeris mias, ke akirixe, ke ipen, eti tris imere, ke Ninevei catastrophisate. And Jonah began to go through, or to go into the city, polis, as the going of one day. Imeris, ephemeral, so one day. And what did he do? He akirixe, the verb for kerygma, for this, he proclaimed out loud as he's walking through one day. This stranger comes into their city, and he's yelling out and said, yet tris imere, 3 days, and Nineveh will be eradicated. Oh, that's pretty heavy. I mean, if somebody come walking in your city and saying your town was going to be eradicated, he might try to grab a hold of him and put him in an insane asylum. But miraculously, it says in verse 5, Ke epistevson I andres Ninevei to theo, Ke akirixon nistian, Ke enadhisan to sakus, apo megalu, avton eos mikru avton. And the men of Nineveh believed. They believed, and Jesus mentions how the Capernaum would be basically cursed, because as the men of Nineveh believed the prophet Jonah, the greater than prophet Jonah was there in Capernaum, and these men believed Jonah, and they believed they believed what Jonah said, and they believed in God. And they proclaimed, akirixon, they proclaimed out loud, a fast. And they put on sakus. Sako, we have a sackcloth. It's almost a transliteration, the first part of it anyway. From their great megalu, mega, the great people, unto their mikru, a micrometer measures small things until they're small. So from great unto small, the people believed in God, and they did something about it. They proclaimed a fast. And it continues in verse 6. Ke igisen o logos pros ton vasilea Ninevei, ke exanesti apo tu thronu aftu, ke perilato tin stolin aftu, apa iaftu, ke perivalato sakon, ke ekathoson epi spodou. And the word, the logos, approached pros to the Basileia, the king, the basilica, the place of a king, the basil plant. The word approached the king of Nineveh. He rose up, apo, from his thronu, the throne, almost a direct transliteration, and he removed his stolene, the stole. It's a word we used to use in the early 20th century. My mother did. She had a stole. It's pretty well lost now, but it was like something you put along your shoulders. He removed it from himself, and he wore sakon, sackcloth, which was a real rough, the kind of the heavy material that they store potatoes in these big sacks. It's real rough. And the idea is that this made it your fast by putting on the sackcloth and not eating. You got serious. If you weren't serious, you'd just wear something that was comfortable and you'd just keep stuffing yourself. But when you do these things for a period of time, then you're showing that you're serious about what the thing is that you are wearing these for. And then he sat upon spodou, he sat upon ashes, so he wasn't sitting on his throne anymore, but he was sitting on ashes, which were cinders, sharp and not a soft couch. So he's doing something about it, the king. In verse 7 it continues, Ke ekirikthi ke erethi inti Ninevei para tu vasileos, ke para ton megistanon avtu, legon ton, I anthropi ke ta katini, ke evois, ke ta provata, mi gevsastoson, mi they nemestoson, ke idor mi pietoson. The men, go back up to 7, and it was proclaimed, there is the akirikthi, the verb for the kerygma, it was proclaimed and was spoken in, 7, in being the preposition, in Nineveh by the king of Basileos. Ke para ton megistanon, the megi, the great people, mega, again, the megistanon of two. Legonton, the leg, saying, E anthropy, anthropology, study of mankind, the men and the cattle and the voes. We have the English derivative, at least it was in the dictionary as one, it was a beef from the voes, the oxen, and the sheep. Well, let them not taste, nor feed, and let them not drink either. Water, hydraulics being the derivative having to do with water flow. So this king proclaimed that they were not to do these things. In verse 8 it continues, Ke perivalonto sakus ke I anthropi ke ta katini, ke anavoisen proston theon ek tenos, ke apestripson ekastos apotis odhu avton ton tis poniras, ke apotis, and we'll go to that in a second. We'll start here. And the men, the anthropoid, and the men and the cattle put around sakus, sackcloths. And they yelled out to God, the men is, and theon, theology, study of God, and they yelled out to God fervently. And each turned from their wicked way, the odhu, the cathode being the electric current, and from their adikias tis in hersin avton, legontis, from the iniquity in their hands, chiropractor being a heresy, chiro, saying, 3:9, tis ethan e metanoisi o theos, ke apostrepsi ex orgis thimu avtu, ke umi apolometha. They're saying, well, who knows if God, theos, theology, shall change his mind? 3340, metanoeo is the word here, but this word in other manuscripts is different. It's epistrepsi, who will uh, turn away, and it's used in couple of places. Metanoeo wasn't used as changing his mind, or it also means repenting. That's what it was used in the New Testament. Jesus tells us to repent, and God repented. And some places been changed his mind, but in other, like I said, other manuscripts, it's a different word. And yeah, you might, if you're interested enough in that, you can open up our CD of the Lambert Bow 1709 Bible, and you'll see that I believe the Aldine has it epistrepsi, and you can see the variants of this in the Bose Bible. And anyway, God shall change his mind. Who knows if he will do this? And he shall return from the anger, the orgis. We have the English derivative, an orgy. It's not the same meaning, but the word came, an orgy is an anger, this type of fervent and turning up fervor and fermenting this action, and had to do with more than just a mind thing, but it's a physical type of a thing. It's that God, who knows if God will turn from his orgies of his thimu. We have the English derivative, as far as a dictionary, some dictionaries says a fume, to fume, in rage, the thimu of his rage. And in no way should we perish. So they're saying that, who knows, God may change his mind. So verse 10, it continues, K, ethan, o theos, ta erga, avton, oti, apestripson, apo, ton, odon, avton, ton, poniron, K metanoisen, o theos, epi, ti kakia, I alalise tu pise aftis, ke uk epise. And God saw, theos, theology, the erga, ta erga, the works, ergonomics has to do with work. He saw their works. They did things that proved that they were no longer acting the way that God didn't want them to be. And it wasn't that he saw something, they did something to prove it, not just say you're going to do it and not really do it. God sees in our hearts, but our works here, God also sees. It's not that, sometimes, I mean, we can, our hearts deceive us, as we see in many places in the Bible where people think that they're doing something for God in their heart. And yes, God sees the heart, but he also sees their works. He looks at our works. So he looks at our heart and he looks at our works. If the two aren't going together, if our heart says, well, I forgive somebody, but yet our works show that we do things against them, then there's a problem there. And God saw their works, that they turned from their wicked ways. Poniron, odon, othos, the way, and God changed his mind. Again, and that's another word in Complutensian Polyglot doesn't use that word. So this is all, it has paraklethi. He relented, that God relented in the Complutensian Polyglot over the evil which he spoke, elalise, the lalia, to say 4160 is again that poet word, to do to them. And he did not do it. The P, twice we have the verb to do. So God either relented or changed his mind over the evil which he spoke to do to them. Now, there are many places in the Bible God talks about doing evil against people, or bad things which are going to happen to them. And he does change his his mind, and he relents and he allows us to change our attitudes also, and then he gives us his grace, which we really don't deserve, but he's a loving God, and he does give us this grace, and he gave grace to these people of Nineveh, even though a little later they will be completely destroyed, as maybe the next generation came back and began doing the same things they were doing before, or maybe these people here change. A lot of times people do that. They'll have a change towards God. That's what Jesus is talking about in the parable of the sower, how the seed fell on the rocky soil and people just thought it was great. They had an experience with God and asked God to come into their lives, but then when the problems came, they changed and went back to their old ways. So this is a condition of man, and God says in many places the word meno, to remain until the end. The one that remains until the end will be delivered. And somehow these people did change their attitude here, and they were delivered, but we'll go into the next chapter and see how Jonah reacts to what God and these Ninevites did. So we'll see you in the next chapter 4. God bless.